Hey, welcome to Graphic Policy Television, GPTV. I'm Brett. In my hands is History Comics Stonewall Riots, making a stand for LGBTQ rights. So this is one that I've been really looking forward to reviewing and reading. It's written by Archie Bongionvanni, art by A. Andrews. All right, so History Comics is a really great way to go and learn about history. It's a graphic novel series published by First Second that take us through key moments in time. So here we got the Stonewall Riots. There's also been the Great Chicago Fire, the Challenger disaster, Rhoda colony, and then about the American Bison, which was an interesting one, as it really kind of showed how important the American Bison were towards American history. So this one clearly about the Stonewall Riots, but I think what's interesting is it covers the riots decently. It itself talks about the riots themselves. So for those who don't know, it took place, I think, in 1969 in the summer at Stonewall Inn, and was a uprising. Some call it a protest, an uprising, revolution, or Stonewall Riots is what I think a lot of, most people know it as. And it was took place at Stonewall Inn, and kind of like a fighting against the harassment that the LGBTQ community was having. And became this like really landmark moment in LGBTQ rights and the activist movement. So what this story does is it has 3 kids and a grandmother. They go back in time to kind of witness these events. I think everyone is LGBT in it, all 3 kids and even the grandmother. And they see the events in person. There are known people that, like named famous people from history, are in this. But what's I think kind of interesting is it's not necessarily about the specifics of the riots, and I think that's what's really kind of intriguing about this. Is I went in hoping to kind of learn more about the specifics, about those key people, about the acts, about what happened. Instead, this is really more about kind of the moment, the tension, the buildup, the explosion, and the riot itself, the uprising itself. It talks about how, during this time period that there it was illegal to be LGBTQ, that a lot of laws were on the record up to 1962. There was, a little bit kind of went to the wayside then, but not nearly enough. It was still very much usually illegal to be gay. That there were clothing laws that you could only wear a certain amount of clothing of the opposite gender, and if you wore more than that, you could be arrested. There were places discriminating against LGBTQ individuals that wouldn't serve them. What would happen, the cops would kind of break into these bars. They would harass the people attending, maybe arrest them. But really what they were looking for were handouts and bribes. It was, the chance for the police to beat up people that they disliked, the LGBTQ community, but also to be paid off. What's interesting, and I did learn about this, I did not know, is that the mob owned a lot of the bars and were paying off the cops. Which makes sense. And, some of the protests were to not just get the cops out of these bars, but also the mob. That I did not know. And I think it does a really solid job of capturing the moment and the feel and the buildup and the tension, and the protests. It doesn't go super deep into it with tons of details, and it's explained why later on. But what I actually really, really enjoyed about this is the latter part of it. It's maybe the last 15, 20%, maybe last quarter of it. And it goes through LGBTQ history of not just the Stonewall Riots, but really explains that the Stonewall Riots was just a moment. That it was a moment that has been built up for many years, that there were actually many protests up to that point, and that there was, history to follow afterwards. That the Stonewall Riots wasn't, this moment where everything just kind of came together and happened. That there was actually still a lot of division in the community as to what to do, if anything. There was also, much more to do in the 70s, in the 80s. Of course, we had the AIDS epidemic, which really brought a lot of the community together. and had them organizing even further for another cause. I think it was by 1997, it said there was 6 million people had died from AIDS. But it just says that, it's an interesting thing is that it really kind of nails down that, like, we know Stonewall, but there's many moments before that we don't that are just as important, that there were sit-ins for restaurants that wouldn't serve individuals who were non-conforming to their gender if they were wearing clothing of the opposite gender, as an example. Obviously there was the AIDS epidemic, which was the 80s, and of course you had things like Harvey Milk being elected in 77. There was a fight for LGBTQ equality at the Second Congress to Unite Women, which was in 1970. There was, obviously the thing that I think really is interesting, and I'm going to get to it because it's one of the moments that it talks about afterwards, is that I think the reason it doesn't go into details, and it says afterwards, is that the details are kind of unknown. There's a lot of arguments about what happened at Stonewall. A lot of the specifics, it's just word of mouth and people's recollections, and the recollections maybe aren't good, and even the recollections might be biased in some ways. There was trans individuals and people of color who were key to the uprising who have been written out by many in the community. It says right here, and I just kind of want to read it. It says, on the first anniversary of the Stonewall Riots, gay pride marches happened in Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. The fight for liberation wasn't without divisions, though. The LGBTQ movement has always been fraught with racism and transphobia. People of color and trans women were often left out of the movement, including our friends Sylvia and Marcia, two of the real individuals that are mentioned. The two of them co-founded STAR, which helped homeless and trans youth. They were often at demonstrations, marches, and political actions. In 1973, Sylvia was asked not to speak at the Christopher Street Liberation Day rally. The march had become more of a celebration and less political. Sylvia stormed the stage and gave a speech about Star House and gay men and women in prison. It's interesting is that, the fight still goes on. We are seeing that fight shift a little bit. There's obviously attacks on trans individuals, especially trans youth. And we know that is the first step to go further, to roll back gay unions, gay marriage, gay rights as a whole, that the attack on trans individuals is an opening salvo from the far right to roll back progress. But unfortunately, even people in the LGBTQ, I guess it would be LGB and maybe Q, not the T, because it'd be weird for the T. Many of them are actually, not many of them, some of them are anti-trans. There's discrimination within the community against bisexual individuals. So it shows that, while there is a movement, while there's been a lot of action, and talks about it in this, is that it's not always been unified, which, I think is something that is great to stress, in that that the fight goes on. We are seeing that today. Attacks on trans individuals is part of the LGBTQ movement, and this has been something that's been going on for decades. Decades and decades and decades. I want to say that the first protest, hold on, let me see when it has the first protest on here, because it's interesting. So the first one it mentions is Cooper Donuts, where I did not know. This was a 24-hour donut shop where one of the first queer uprisings in the United States took place in 1959. So we are looking at 63 years. And hopefully we don't have to do this for another 63 years. It's a really good primer for it. I think it kind of captures the moment, it captures the feel, it captures the buildup of it all, and then the latter half of it really kind of dives into the history and shows that there's still a fight to go. And there's tons of stuff in the back of organizations to check out and terms to learn. You can go get this now. It's in comic shops. We got a link beneath this video. Put it in your zip code. It'll tell you if a shop's near you. No shop, no problem. We do have some links where you can purchase your own. There'll be affiliate links, so we do get a small percentage by doing that. You help support our site. And speaking of support, I want to thank First Second for hooking us up with the review copy. And of course, thank you all for watching. If you are into comics, if you're into graphic novels, check us out every single day at graphicpolicy.com. We're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Tumblr, all at Graphic Policy, keeping it nice and consistent. Until next time, keep reading those comics and keep it geeky. Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.